So now I wish to invite here Tom from Midan. Tom, are you here somewhere? Yeah, I was looking for Tom the whole day. So Tom managed to unify, I think, all the major media outlets in Mexico, right, somehow? Before elections 2018, so 90 newspapers and websites used to work together to verify electoral campaign. So I think it's impossible in Belarus, the same as impossible in many of our countries. And I hope Tom will share the secret. So that's the remote control, and that's the microphone.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. It's my first time in Minsk. And I'm going to try and be brave. I'm not going to talk at the Media Literacy Solutions Forum about media literacy. I'm going to talk about misinformation literacy. And I'll explain a little bit about what I think that is. I'm very fortunate in the job that I have, which is basically I get to travel around the world and work with journalists to come up with projects and initiatives that work to build collaborations around the challenge of finding and debunking viral misinformation, particularly around elections. And I'm going to talk today about a project I worked on last year in Mexico with Animal Politico, who are an amazing investigative reporting unit, with a team of fact-checkers, and with AJ Plus Español, which is the Spanish language team at AJ Plus. We did it with support from Google News Lab, who I think are here, and the Facebook Journalism Project. And the goal of Verificado was to see if we could assemble a big coalition of Mexican media, whether it's TV, digital, radio, around this challenge of finding the misinformation, the disinformation that was being spread by actors inside and outside Mexico, and see if we could debunk it. And this is in the context of kind of post-Cambridge Analytica revelations, where it was clear that they were trying to be active. And Mexico actually has a long history of using social network manipulation to pollute the information ecosystem to try and manipulate public opinion ahead of elections. The team was amazing. They're great. I'm not going to talk too much about what we did because I actually rarely think about what I do in terms of media literacy. So I was very happy to be invited to this event and try and think about what aspects of Verificado related to media literacy. And it made me think about the kind of thing that surprised me most about Verificado, which was that in addition to all of the amazing fact-checking work that we did and all of the debunking work that we did and all the things that we found and all the investigations that we did, the most successful content that we produced was actually around how does misinformation work and how can we understand how people are manipulating the information ecosystem. And AJ Plus, led by my colleague Alba Moraroca, who's an amazing visual journalist, produced a whole series of videos that I want to show you. Now, they're all in Spanish, and so you don't need to listen too much, but the team at AJ Plus is really great at making maybe turn the volume down a little bit. Is it possible to volume down on the video? The team at AJ Plus is really good at making videos that contain a lot of information, sometimes about complex topics, and packaging it into very compelling and interesting and visual and engaging videos. So in this video, which is a bit jumpy, Angel is talking about some of the ways that audiences some of the clues that they can look out for when they're looking at the content that they're seeing on Facebook or on WhatsApp. Part of the goal was to help audiences do some of this work themselves, raise the kind of public awareness about what they could do. We also published a whole series of videos that explained the different ways that people, actors, political parties, could manipulate the social networks. So in this video, we explain how botnets are used to create fake trending topics on Twitter, which is a big platform in Mexico. And this is used by political parties to create a fake perception that one candidate is very popular and to attack other candidates. We also worked in kind of a related way to how Farida talked about to explain to audiences why we were verifying memes and why we were debunking memes. So a lot of the content that we were seeing was extremely visual in nature. And so we decided at some point that it would be really useful to the audience to understand that dynamic and to try and explain a little bit about why we were taking so much time to investigate these memes that were being shared on WhatsApp and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And again, you can see I think a really important point here is that the videos that we're creating, they're not talking about simple things. They're talking about, this is talking about memetic misinformation. It features my colleague Ansha Meena. But it's produced in a very compelling and visual way. I think this video was viewed something like 400,000 times over the course of the 6 weeks of the project. What this shows is that actually there's a real audience appetite for this kind of content. Audiences want to know how they're being manipulated and how people are using this space. And there's value in media groups and projects like Verificado explaining that to the audiences. We also sought to tell some of the human stories around misinformation. So in Mexico, bots can both be fake accounts on Twitter, but it can also be people who are paid by political parties to post content that is pro or against a given candidate. And so we found 3 bots, 3 of these people that were being paid by the campaigns, and we interviewed them and we spoke to them about why they were doing this work, what it was like to do this work. And this again, it kind of shines a different light on the misinformation space. We also developed a kind of glossary of terms. There's a lot of confusing technical language around misinformation: bots, trolls, sock puppets, decks, turf. We created these visuals specifically for Twitter and for Instagram that explained to people what these different words meant. And this was actually in response to the first video I showed about how bots were being used to float trending topics. We got a lot of questions from the audience. They're like, what is a bot? What is a sock puppet? What is a troll? And so we tried to explain to the audience what these different words mean and the different ways these terms were used. We also used the content that we were debunking, rather than just saying this is false. We used that content to explain how we spotted that it was false, and also to show how these fake images, how these manipulated content are created. So this video, I think it was viewed like over 200,000 times, shows how easy it is to use Photoshop to manipulate an image, and what clues you can look for when you're looking at an image. This video, it was the single most viewed piece of content that Verificado produced. It was viewed just over 2 million times from the project. And it's super simple. All it shows is how a regular person using their mobile phone can do a reverse image search. And that was a real piece of content that we found that was going viral. It was basically saying, Adidas is making trainers that supports one of these parties. And this video is super simple, shows how you can disprove that as just a regular person. It's not aimed at journalists, it's not aimed at professors, it's just aimed at people who are seeing this kind of content. And I think the scale of the audience for this particular video and how many times it was shared and how many times it was viewed showed that there's a real opportunity here to support this kind of content, and there's real value in it from the audience's perspective. So what I want to encourage people to do today, particularly people who are journalists, is there's a real opportunity, I think, to explain to audiences not just when something is fake in isolation, not just that this fact is wrong or that this video is fake, but to also explain how these things happen and why they happen. This is a really good example of this from the Washington Post, who recently published this guide on different types of manipulated video. And I think there's a lot more room for this kind of content. Just very quickly, I think the lessons I've learned from working on this project in Verificado is that if your misinformation literacy content has to be extremely visual, extremely engaging, we benefited because we were tying it to relevant content. We were using examples from the work that we were doing journalistically and incorporating that in this kind of misinformation literacy content that was actually much more popular than the debunks that we were producing themselves. In terms of distribution, I think one reason that the videos and content that we produced around misinformation was so widely viewed was that Verificado was not viewed as a media literacy project. It was viewed as a publishing brand. We had a high profile. We were kind of seen as a media organization, which we were for about 6 weeks. And so incorporating misinformation literacy content not as a discrete field, but into the daily work of reporting was extremely successful. We also used the project distribution network as 90 media organizations and civil society organizations across Mexico. So the content that we were publishing had a very, very wide reach. We also had partners in 28 of the 30 states in Mexico, so we had a broad geographic group, and we were publishing on Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, all these channels. Now, the piece of motivational, the motivational part of this talk, and why I think misinformation literacy is particularly important. There's some narratives that disinformation doesn't really have an impact and media literacy doesn't really have an impact because in isolation, if I just see one given fact or one piece of fake news, then probably I'm not going to be persuaded by it, and I have my own fixed point of view, and my body maintains your kind of point of view in the same way that it maintains your body temperature, in the same way that it maintains your body heat, your body weight, for example. And Mike Caulfield, who writes about misinformation literacy, had some really great articles that he put out in December that kind of challenged that. And he basically made the point that it's not one piece of fake news in isolation or one politician lying in isolation. It's the collective impact. It's the drift. And over time, when you're exposed to this stuff over and over and over and over again, the fixed point that you usually have, it starts to shift and it starts to drift. And that's a very compelling and powerful dynamic. And we see that with the kind of wave of disinformation. We know that disinformation actors know this, and they try and flood networks with disinformation. It's not about any given story. It's about fundamentally undermining the trust in any information and the trust in any journalism. And so I think if we're going to push back against that, if we're going to build a sense of resiliency, then I think media literacy is extremely important, and I think misinformation literacy as a kind of potentially nascent subsection of media literacy can go a long way to helping. Thank you very much.